someone's going down multiple floors, and each floors get crazier and crazier and more intensifying.
Oh yeah, the
So
platform.
yes, the platform, correct.
Yeah.
That's probably the name. Again, it's been a while, but yeah.
Story tension is what's gonna put people on the edge of their seat most of the time. Like you can give someone a jump scare or like a frightening image, and that's gonna scare them for, you know. I think this was like famously said by Alfred Hitchcock. Like
The movie affected the believers, the not believers, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And talking about the jump scares, it's a movie that doesn't have none a single jump scare. And
I would say a classical for me would be 13B.
Oh my
Really
god,
good,
yo, that
really
has
good
to make the
horror movie.
list. That's a very good
Yeah,
movie. Oh my god,
it's a
yeah.
Captain Howdy?
Necesito escapar. Si queréis sobrevivir.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our roundtable discussion on a reign of fear and how horror has dominated the year 2024. I am your host, Malika, and joined with us today are our esteemed critics who are going to deep dive into how horror has impacted cinema last year. So please go ahead and let's introduce ourselves. We can start with Ankit.
Hey everyone, my name is Ankit. I also go by mostly unbiased reviews on Insta and RecoBee. I've been on the app for quite some time. It's been a great platform and a great experience. And yeah, should I just go ahead and start about the topic for Reign of Horror?
Yeah.
Yep. So it's been a really nice rise to see the horror genre increase this year in multiple industries, Hollywood, Bollywood, other regional languages as well. And the big factor for that is the attraction for audience. Hollywood horror brings that fear and excitement that people want to see on the big screens. Limiting it to a small screen does keep it a bit limited, but keeping it to the big screen allows the audience to be captivated. And this year, it looks like a lot of new movies have tried different aspects as well to engage the audience, whether it be through comedy, through romance, or through special effects. You see a lot of new horror movies with greater focus on special effects as well.
Right. Great. Thank you. Let's introduce ourselves. You can go ahead, James, if you want.
okay, I'm James from the Critic 27 on Instagram, and this year definitely has, I agree, been a great year for horror. I think it's so easy for horror films to be a success because it's they attract a really wide audience, but with such small budgets, and so it's very easy for us to see high returns on them.
Right. Yeah, let's go ahead with movie rating and ranking then.
hey everyone. Well, my name is actually Francisco. I use the name Movie Rating and Ranking for all my accounts. I've been
Okay.
in Instagram and on a lot of the platforms, including this year RecoBee. That's been great. And well, I think horror, yeah, as you all has been said, it's been great this year. But not only this year, actually, if you consider the previous years, it's been great too. For example, I don't know, like movies with names like the Black Phone and all that. It's been amazing. So I really hope that horror is being more considered for the great awards of cinema, less I don't know the big names that you already know, that Golden Globes and all that. So yeah, I like it.
Great. Cool then. So let's dive in. So many argue that horror is a genre, like which is in constant evolution. Like what shifts in like the portrayal of fear, like from psychological thrillers to visceral, or like from supernatural to like something very realistic and authentic. So what stood out for you guys this year?
I would say personally for me, what stood out was horror comedy, especially in Bollywood, because we saw that rise a lot with 3-2,
Yeah,
Bhool Bhulaiya 3, Munjia.
yeah,
That horror and comedy aspect. The comedy aspect adds that, okay, we can add even more audience make it more family oriented, gather that around. And the
Yeah.
second point I would like to mention is also special effects. A lot of horror movies are now emphasizing on special effects. Like if you've seen the Hollywood movie Tarot earlier this May, even though many people didn't think of it as a great movie, but it really did focus on special effects. The cinematography was fantastic, which is why when I watched it in theaters, it was much more engaging compared to anyone that watched it at home. They might have not found it as fun.
Right. That's great.
So, Ankit, just adding on
Hmm.
that, do you have this horror comedy obviously is evolving a lot in India, but do you have
Hmm.
a similar thing in Hollywood movies recently or in the recent past?
So with Hollywood, I see that there's also similar to Bollywood. There's a rise in sequels. Like this year, we saw Smile 2,
Smile too.
Terrifier 3, and a lot of return sequels that came like last year. Like as James was saying, we also saw multiple recent horror movies like Insidious. We saw Insidious last year, so there's a
Quite,
lot of
quite,
rising
quite,
sequels
Quite
as well.
Place also came, right?
Yep,
Quite Place.
yep. Quiet Place Day One. So you see a lot of these sequels returning, which brings two major aspects. One, the returning fan base, so that's already an audience, and then two, it also brings that big theater experience, of course.
I was just gonna say I'm glad you brought up Tarot because I did not personally think it was a great movie, but it was kind of nice to see it be such a financial success. Um, and part of that, I think, Tarot was only rated PG-13, so
Yeah.
I think you're
Right.
we're starting to see this as well with like I think Megan came out last year. We're starting to see
Correct.
some like PG-13 horror movies do well at the box office, which is something I feel like we haven't really seen in a while. Because you're attracting an audience that, doesn't need their ID to get into the movie. Um, and I think also there's been a resurgence in practical effects, definitely like with Alien this year.
Mhm.
Um, and we're seeing companies use the fact that they're using practical effects in a horror movie as a marketing tactic. Like with Alien, this was huge. Like they were really
Yeah.
pushing the fact that they were using practical effects. They were not just using CGI. Like the actors would really be on set with these models of the xenomorphs and of the face huggers, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to me, it's kind of a similar feeling because, for example, I feel that there is a lot of small budget movies that came out this year, and they
Mhm.
dare to talk about their own stories. They dare to talk about their ideas, and that I think it's reflected on the a very a few big budget movies. For example, The Substance, Alien
Yeah.
Romulus, like you said recently, where the practical effects are coming back. Actually, yeah, they are there, but obviously mix it with visual effects and all that. But yeah, I think it's wonderful that small movies are coming to the light, to in some kind of thought, inspiring the big productions. So I like that. Yeah.
Great. Great. Good to know that. So, to my next question, I wanted to ask you guys, how do you think globally this particular genre has evolved throughout this year, in 2024? Globally, like not even just Hollywood, Bollywood, if we speak about any other, regional horror movies as well.
I feel like again, it's the emphasis on sequels. They
Yeah.
really like to resurrect, even if it's like an older movie. For example,
Yeah.
Terrifier. They're really trying to resurrect whatever could have been the original fan base that they can build off of and create either a new fan base off of that or widen their fan base. So I feel like regardless of the industry, and this has been a long, long thing as well, but with the multiple universes we have now, I feel like the rise of sequels is definitely what's giving that helping hand in
Yeah.
resurrecting the genre.
So, so in that, Ankit, I think the point is it's a good thing, but again, the creativity aspect comes into the picture, right?
Of
Like
course, yeah.
Are you making it
Yeah.
monotonous kind of thing, doing the same
Correct.
template, for example, right?
Yeah.
As in obviously you would have enjoyed Stree much better than Stree 2. And that was my personal thing. Reason being
Same here.
obviously
Yeah.
Stree was like very original, right? And
Right.
obviously Mungia also came up with little different, but since it was original, Mungia was still kind of struck the chord kind of stuff,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And that is with Long Legs, for example, right? Long Legs is not a sequel, but I'll say the example of Quiet Place, Day One. It was
Right.
nowhere near the Quiet Place, the first
First one,
Quiet
and it
Place,
was like
right?
the same
Obviously,
template.
I was like,
Right. Right.
I kind of gave up into like watching it because of the reviews, and okay, it's because it's a
Exactly.
sequel. But then how long that will continue in terms of like
Correct.
the user's patience, right? Okay, with sequels, how like obviously Bhool Bhulaiya or something like that. So that gives a kind of balance. Where should be the balance be, right? In that sense, correct?
Yeah, that's definitely a really good point. It definitely does matter that the movie itself has to be good. Like you mentioned, Long Legs. Last year there was a movie called Boogeyman, which sort of went a little unnoticed, but it's a really good horror movie in terms of like the simplicity, the horror factor, the lore, all of that, and including the substance as well. We've never seen something like The Substance. It's like sort of a different kind of horror movie, which is not a sequel, right? Like just like you mentioned, so yeah, we still, I'm glad that we still have a mix of both because it's nice to see returning characters in the sequels, being able to connect with them. But then it's also nice to see something new and fresh.
Yeah, but to me, it's a interesting phenomenon because how can you measure the successful? How successful is a movie? For example, we are used to look at the numbers, at the figures, at the money, and all that, but you have to consider also the quantity, the number of movies that are came out. For example, we have streaming platforms like Netflix that is it's really open to new stories and also to sequels. So in this sense, the sequels are like some kind of sure formula to success because they tell stories that people already liked, um, and they are daring, as I said before, to tell stories about horror. So yeah,
No, that's a fair point because they know
Yeah.
where the money is, they know where the audience is. Like it's more like retaining the same audience. It's just that obviously, yeah, that kind of brings back the old audience or the fan base, right? So I think it's a fair point. It's more about, yeah, obviously if someone sees the substance, right? And so substance got so much of good reviews on RecoBee, like we
Yeah.
as in it was more like okay, this is something worth watching, right? And then we never heard of it, and we were like, okay, people went mad on okay, what kind of different horror movie it is, and it's not only about the horror part; it's more about the creativity angle that they use in the
Yeah.
substance, and I think it's more
exactly.
about a whole the theme, right? That was so brilliant. So I think obviously there has to be a mix of creativity and a kind of money angle or business angle comes in where people have to bank up on the sequels, right? So yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yep.
I definitely agree that sequels have been the focus, but I think we also see, which is pretty normal, but I think we've also seen like a rise in success of low budget, like low budget horror films, like original films that are using money efficiently, really, which is a little kind of crazy to see like some horror films with different effects uh have such low budgets, and then we see all these superhero movies with crazy effects, and the budgets are 10, 15 times the
Hmm.
amount,
Yeah.
uh, which proportionally doesn't seem to add up. But I think horror movies are very good at efficiently using their budgets,
Yeah,
and
actually, a good
that's
example of that is the Terrifier that
yeah,
include everything that we're talking about. For example, if you say that they're using the money efficiently, well, the first Terrify has a very small budget, and then
right,
they use it
Hmm.
to the sequels that also applies to the other thing that we were talking about. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
I,
The good thing about horror movies is like they don't have to boast of a huge cast, right? People
Right.
watch horror
Yeah.
movies for stories or for their visuals or for their kind of
Hmm.
terrifying actions, but not for cast, never for cast, because
Right.
that is the least attract. So that's where the budget comes into the picture. That is a good story is made. Horror is the best genre to kind of make it, right? So
Right.
yeah.
So moving on, like considering the like diverse ranges of opinions, on RecoBee, like from critics, what specific elements do you believe most significantly influence the audience's reaction or the perception of the horror film?
Yeah. Just to clarify this question, it is more like long legs, or maybe, for example, I saw the devil, right? I think I saw the devil. We saw mixed reviews. Like some really loved that movie,
Yeah.
like 4.5, 5 star, and then some of them were like, okay, no, this was not. It was like 2.5 star. So the range, right? What exactly you guys look into a horror movie specifically, which makes you like, okay, this actually hits the chord or something like that individually for you guys?
Well, if I'm honest, the horror genre, it's actually not my thing. But when I watch a horror film, it's because I'm looking an interesting story that can be a little bit more grounded. For example, some stories that are believable and that this story that fit in our world, in a real world. I'm not a guy that looks for a movie that is full of fantasy linked with horror. So, for example, I don't know, we can talk about some kind of serial killer or some things like that. But the thing is that recently the good horror movies doesn't have all that, and they are still interesting. So that's the point. I'm attracted to all that movies that horror are giving us. So I'm pretty excited about that.
And I agree. I feel like for me personally, the most important factor for a horror movie to attract me is the lore. The lore has to be believable. Yes, it does make it more believable if the story is more grounded. In fact, those are also the horror movies I enjoy more too. But if it's not grounded, if the lore is still good, it can keep me hooked. So it has to be a really good atmosphere, and also I feel like this also goes back to the cast a little bit because the performances matter a lot too. Because I'll pick out a specific example in Smile 2. I personally did see some overacting here and there, which was kind of hard for to keep me engaged. But if when I was seeing Long Legs or even Tarot for that matter, it sort of did make a little believable with the acting, because again, the performances do matter a lot, but again, it's also the lore that really does attract, specifically me.
I think for me it's really about tension, and because that's the goal of the genre at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Uh and I think like labeling it as like being scary isn't the right way to look at it. I think like story tension is what's going to put people on the edge of their seat most of the time. Like you can give someone a jump scare or like a frightening image, and that's going to scare them for, you know, I think this was like famously said by Alfred Hitchcock. Like you can give an audience like 5 seconds of fear or like 10 minutes of tension, and the tension is going to be more powerful. So for me, I think it's really about like story tension, like, and like Ankit mentioned, like how believable it is that
Yeah.
with the cast, and also how believable it is that these characters are really in danger. Um, like yeah, I think it's important for a horror movie to put its audience on the edge of their seat like that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I actually like that. I like that point, James. I'm glad that you mentioned that because like without tension, the horror movie does seem a little stale. Like if it's just banking on jump scares or visual effects or a big cast, yes, that can sometimes help. But yeah, to watch the movie throughout and remember it, like your experience, it's the tension that definitely matters the most. So I agree with that.
I agree too, because with good build-up tension, you don't need jump scares. And also,
Mm.
I agree with the
Exactly.
yeah, And also, I agree about the thing that you said recently about the cast. Um, yeah, it's an attractive point also. For example, The Substance again have Demi Moore, and Demi Moore in a horror movie. It's like, well, I want to see that, you know. Another example is that, for example, last night I saw a movie called something like "It's What's Inside." It's on Netflix, and it's kind of overacting. And that point, it's very low. So yeah, the cast is very important too.
Great. Yeah, good to know. Very similar points, yet very different, contrasting opinions as well. That's good to know. If you could define horror in 2024 in one sentence, what would it be?
Well, that's a difficult one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
it's a
question.
thinker.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
You said in one word or one sentence?
One sentence is fine. Yeah, one
One
sentence would be
sentence.
good.
I would say like big screen experience that definitely keeps you hooked, regardless of what you know,
Okay.
what the atmosphere might be.
Right. Right.
I
I
agree
would say
with that.
something like, yeah, sorry. I would say something like classic and new horror for all audiences, considering that the old ideas are coming back like Alien, and
Yeah.
considering also the PG-13 rating that the movies are coming with. So yeah, that would be.
Great.
I agree with that. I think to put it simply, tense and efficient. Like intense in story and efficient behind the scenes. With
Mhm.
budgets and such.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
You know, it's a pretty good point, the universal concept of horror, right? Because horror has its own fans, obviously, right? And I think
Yeah.
Yes.
it's always like if it's a horror fan, it will always be a horror fan, and they'll always watch movies, even though like it is very surprising. Most of the horror movies are not rated good. Okay, it's a very as
Yeah.
an at least when we see right an IMDb rating which used to follow earlier, it will be like okay, no horror movie will be rated above 7. Only very few when we began with the Conjuring series and all
Yeah.
those kind of things, or the classics like The Grudge or The Ring or something like that, right? But most horror movies still rated between 6 to 7 are very good movies. But then I really don't know the concept. But then when we do the universal aspect, try to bring in more fan base, maybe that might change. That might bring some more kind of storytelling to a new angle altogether. So I think that is something which is really good. Thanks for bringing it out.
Yeah, I guess especially for Bollywood, it feels like it depends on the audience because audience here are like very hooked to the mainstream ideas and mainstream. But now since they have changed their perception to more on folklore and infusing that with some horror, only then people have started liking it. Even for people from my age, like Munja was there, as you said. It's very relatable to like folklore and culture and Indian culture, and then yeah, these authentic. So my next question is, I want you guys to recommend one very authentic and classical horror movie and one like more advanced or new age horror movie that you found really great.
I would say a classical for me would be 13B.
Oh my
Really
God,
good,
yo, that
really
has
good
to
horror
make a
movie.
list. That's a very good
Yeah,
movie. Oh my God,
it's a
yeah.
yeah, it's really nice. It's just mind-blowing experience, like in terms of storytelling, and the presentation as well. If you see
Yeah.
the movie, it's like has a blue shade to it.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
there's no
right.
color grading. It's like slightly
Yes.
blue shade, and it adds to the tension, as James was saying. Like it doesn't rely on jump scares because there is
Yeah,
no jump scares in the movie. It's just
yeah,
completely tension based. So
right.
that's my one recommendation for a classic, and then a recent fun movie would probably be Street 2 because again I watched that
Okay.
like a few times with my friends and we enjoyed watching it in theaters.
For a classic one, I'll go with the original Ring, um, the Japanese version, because I don't think enough people have seen it, especially in the United States. I feel like a lot more people have seen the remake by Gore Verbinski. Um, but the Ring actually is kind of contradictory to my point because they have some really well placed jump scares. But uh, for a new one, uh, maybe a little bit outside of traditional horror, but Blink Twice I found really intense,
Yeah.
and really, really thrilling. I think the way it was written was really, really interesting.
Yeah, well, to me, a classic movie that I could recommend it's not other than The Exorcist, the 70s
Yeah.
movie. It's such a classic. It's a movie that uh, blow the minds of all the people back then. Imagine that the people without internet, without social media, were like, "What is this?" It's like the movie affected the believers, the not believers, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And talking about the jump scares, it's a movie that doesn't have none a single jump scare, and it's effective. It's effective. So it's a great movie with practical effects that are awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and about a new movie of this year, I would say Heretic. Heretic.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
Heretic. Yeah.
very intelligent movie that
Yeah.
relies on the dialogue. So that's the source of the tension. It's a movie with a very intelligent villain. So yeah, that would be my recommendation of this year.
Great.
So
Amazing,
Malika,
amazing recommendations.
Malika, I'll add mine also since I'm back.
Yeah, of course, Step,
um,
100%. Please go ahead.
Classics I will add. Obviously, everyone has added like two, three. Ring was my favorite too, but I'll add A Tale of Two Sisters. I don't know if you guys have seen.
Okay.
That is something which I feel again. I think it's a Korean horror. Okay, but again, A
Yeah.
Tale of Two Sisters has been like it's again no jump scares, but the way the movie is placed, right? It's really amazing. One of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah.
Is that recently, I have a lot of in my watch list for 2024, but I couldn't watch a lot of movies apart from the Hindi ones, Munjia and Stree 2. Although I like Munjia better than Stree 2 little bit because of the story. But still, I'll go with Long Legs. Long Legs had like I had a lot of expectation with it with the reviews, but still, I would not say that it was that bad. It was still good. But I would have expected a little more because I had relation with Zodiac and kind of, as in there were a lot of
Yeah.
comparison with Zodiac and stuff, but things moved relatively different in a horror genre. Zodiac was completely a thriller genre. So I would say Longlegs is a good watch, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. That's nice. So I want to shift a focus like a bit away from Hollywood and Bollywood. I wanted to know what do you guys think about regional horror films, like horror films which are not very much known, like which don't do really great on big screens, but have are like from like really small directors, independent, and which have done really great. Any regional movies that you have guys watched?
I think regional, outside of Hollywood and Bollywood, there was, I forgot its name. It's the Turkish movie called Dabbe. I might be mispronouncing it, but
Okay.
it's known to be really scary. Like basically the premise is like someone's going down multiple floors and each floors get crazier and crazier and more intensifying.
Oh yeah, the
So it
platform.
yes, the platform, correct.
Yeah.
That's probably the name. I've again, it's been a while, but yeah, that was really interesting to see.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was like it was like a bit mind bending. Like at first you were
Yes,
really thinking like, what is happening? Why are there four floors and like that? And then
exactly.
these specific films, what they do is they don't really portray what they are trying to say because for
Correct.
every person the perspective would be so different. And watching that movie, and if you ask around everybody who is watching that, you will definitely get different perspectives of what they got out of the movie at the end. Someone would say it would be greed,
Correct.
someone would say it would be punishment, someone would say something else. So yeah, great, pretty much.
Yeah. It definitely had a nice motto to it for sure.
Well, maybe it's some kind of cheating, but there is a Chilean movie. I'm Chilean, by the way. There is a Chilean
Okay.
movie that it's some kind of yeah, it had some kind of links to Hollywood, but it's not quite a Hollywood movie. It's called El Conde from Pablo Larraín. Uh, it's not a movie from this year, but it's a recent years movie that show us. a dictator that we have in the 70s called Pinochet. I don't know if you know the story, but it shows in a very funny way. It's some kind of horror comedic movie where Pablo Larraín, that it's a director like Jody and Maria recently. Well, he showed us Pinochet as like a vampire, and it
Yeah.
mixes the actual story with a fantasy story. So that's kind of a genius thing to put it in a way that the people can finally laugh about horrible things that um, occur in the past.
Nice. I guess you're adding these to your watch lists on RecoBee so I can go there and I can check those and I can see them later.
Yeah, please review this because we will. If it
Yeah,
is not
like
there,
seriously
let
to
us
know.
know because I'll add this to list definitely. And I think
Yeah,
same goes for Ankit. Ankit said about now platform is something which I watched, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
yeah,
James, any suggestions from you?
I I the one that keeps coming to me, it's probably the least recent of anything that's been said, but the Babadook, which is
oh
Australian.
yeah, oh wow,
Um
that's also look like
yeah, I think that I guess that was probably 10 years ago now, but
yeah,
um still very uh not outside of the box necessarily, but
yeah,
very interesting take on a kind of a monster movie, but
yeah.
it's an interesting one.
Apart from that, any horror movie that you liked recently?
Me, uh, I I don't remember specifically or movies regional. Mm, no, it is hard to recollect. Like I'm short of words
Okay.
because I wasn't prepared, but I need to see what exactly because I
Yeah,
watch lot of world movies as well, but mostly
yeah.
Korean. I fall for Korean
Okay.
movies. Any Korean horror movies is good for me.
Yeah,
So mostly that's good. Okay.
yeah.
Now
I
we'll
have
still
one good movie.
which
Yeah,
one?
go on, please.
No, no,
I
go ahead.
have Brahma Yugam on my
Ramayana.
list. Yeah, it's like a South Indian movie, and that it's like a very good movie, and it's like a perfect portrayal of how stories should be, portrayed. Like it's great. It's not a very generic horror movie, but it's more on the lines of like teaching you a lesson, so, something very similar to Tumbar, but giving you another lesson, and it's a very slow one. So
Yeah.
amazing movie. So if you guys like to watch that, please, Brahma Yugam would be
Yeah.
great.
And glad you mentioned Tumbar. Tumbar is like top my
Yeah,
favorite, and I'll definitely recommend this
Yeah.
to everyone. Like Tumbar is one
amazing
of
movie.
one of good Indian horror. It's not horror, but it's a mythological movie. But it's really
Yeah,
good actually. So
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
if you mentioned it.
I was just about to say I'm glad you mentioned that because I can't wait for the sequel. Yeah, I'm excited to see how they expand the folklore on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am a bit like not keeping my hopes too high, given it's a sequel and it's coming from Bollywood. But yeah, I am just low key waiting for that as well. Yeah.
So, James and Francisco, just to, as in, since you guys are not, as in, from an Indian movies perspective, very few movies uh, become successful through word of mouth. Tumbad was one of those movies which was made on very low
Yeah.
budget, but it was so well made, right, that it has become a classic in kind of
Yeah.
horror and mythology genre. So it's really good.
Nice. From what year it is?
It is around 2017,
2018.
18 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
like
Yeah,
that.
I guess
2018. Yep.
a few years back. Yeah.
2018, 18, yeah.
Okay.
I have like we have reached to the end of our session and I like love so anything you would guys like to add? Anything? Mhm.
Nope.
Well, for
Definitely
my
glad.
side, I congratulate you guys because you have developed a really nice app. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. I was hooked up. I was in love of the app from the first day, and still I am. It's wonderful. So yeah, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being kind as always. And yeah, I hope it's not the first time, and we can repeat it soon.
Definitely, 100%. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are very grateful to have you for sure.
This was real good. I think this is something which we'll keep doing. We are running our we have begun started our podcast channel where we'll do from a different genres, and I think we'll keep pulling you guys. We would love to hear which topics you want to discuss. We'll roll out that as well. And I think it's like definitely look out for the clips for this, because I think we got very good recommendation. We got very good,
Yeah.
I would say, thought process on how horror movies are going to be going forward. And it's a fun fact, right? Since horror movies did well in India as well, a lot of writers, right? They started writing horror stories just because they are doing well. And I think
Right.
that's the trend. Maybe it won't work next year, but maybe 2 years down the line, there will be again there will be horror movies to the fore again, right? So
Yeah, no,
thanks.
just as Francisco said, I'd really like to thank all of you for having me here. It's definitely fantastic to be able to do this, and again, I'm also looking forward to the next roundtable because again, I can never
Yeah.
stop talking about movies.
No,
We
this is
definitely plan again soon.
yeah, yeah. This is a
Yeah.
good motivation for us.
Yeah.
James, James has been with us for long as an so he's one
Mhm.
of our like very strong critic. So thanks, James, for continuing,
Yeah.
and we would keep looking for the feedback.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think this was definitely productive, sharing ideas like this. And I think we're fostering a great community on the app, and it's nice to see something like this where we come together to discuss a genre that some of us love. And yeah, it's nice to see.
Thank
Thanks
you so
again for all
much,
your
guys.
time. We'll keep talking. I will keep hearing from you guys. Okay. Have a good day.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Yeah, same
Bye.
here. Bye.